I never thought there'd come a day when I'd return to that house in uniform. Not because I was ashamed, but because I'd once promised myself I'd only come back when I no longer needed validation from anyone in my family. But life, as always, forces you to face the things left unresolved. My car turned onto the familiar road blanketed with golden leaves. The soft crunch of tires on gravel made my heart pound. 6 years. Long enough for a child to start elementary school, long enough for me to climb from lieutenant to colonel, but not long enough to erase the memory of that final dinner in this house, where I was met with skeptical looks, just for choosing the military over the corporate world my parents deemed the only path to success. The SUV slowed to a stop in front of the 2-story wooden house nestled under the shade of pine trees in suburban Colorado. The autumn breeze swirled through the eaves, carrying the scent of dry grass and decaying wood, the smell of childhood and of memories I'd tried to bury. I sat behind the wheel for a few more minutes, my hands gripping it until they turned pale. In the trunk was my luggage and a leather bag holding my meticulously pressed uniform, its silver eagle insignia in its familiar place. I hadn't told anyone in my family that I'd become Colonel Rebecca Adams, cybersecurity expert at the Pentagon, directly overseeing the largest defense contract in the history of the company, where my father and brother worked, and I wasn't sure if that would change anything. Have you ever returned to a place where you felt misunderstood, where you had to stay silent to keep the peace, even though it hurt you? If you have, share your story in the comments. I'd like to know I'm not alone. I opened the car door. The crisp, early autumn air slipped through my collar, sending a shiver down my spine. I pulled out my suitcase and uniform bag, walking slowly toward the weathered wooden steps. The same old doormat lay there, its welcome lettering nearly faded, and the wind still whistled through the door's cracks, just as it had the last time I left this place with a suitcase and my mother's sad, wordless gaze. I knocked 3 times. No answer. My hand slid to the doorknob, turning it lightly. Unlocked as always. My mother never locked the door during the day. I stepped inside. The house was silent. Late afternoon light filtered through old floral curtains, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. Everything seemed frozen in time, from the worn sofa to the bookshelf, with a crookedly placed Bible to my parents' wedding photo hanging slightly askew. Nothing had changed. I let out a sigh and set my suitcase by the staircase. A familiar voice came from the kitchen. "Rebecca, you're finally here." No hurried footsteps, no warm embrace, no teary eyes. Just a statement as if I'd been gone for a 2-day business trip. I walked into the kitchen. My mother was peeling potatoes, wearing an apron embroidered with "Home Sweet Home." She didn't look up, didn't meet my eyes. "Eric will be a bit late. He's in a meeting with the board today. Miranda Cole personally chose him to lead the new strategy implementation. Your father's so proud." I forced a smile. "That's great," I said, then walked out, heading to my old room. It was the same. Pale blue walls, a wooden bookshelf, an oak bed, with the wool blanket my mother knitted when I was 16. But something felt off. The shelves still held high school photos. Me winning a math award, a track medal, but no trace of my military career. No ROTC graduation pictures, no commendations from officer school, not even a clipping from the times I was honored. I wasn't surprised. Just stung. I opened the closet. In the bottom drawer among old albums was a faded yellow envelope unsealed, my mother's familiar handwriting. I hesitated, then pulled out the letter. "Dear Rebecca, tonight I read an article about you in the Atlantic. The photo of you in uniform standing next to General Evelyn Ross choked me up. I'm ashamed I didn't understand, didn't support you. I thought you were just trying to prove something. I was wrong. I miss you. And I'm proud. I just don't know how to start saying it." The letter ended mid-sentence. No date, no signature. She'd written it, and never sent it. I sat in silence. The room was still. Only the wind brushed against the window. What had I hoped for? Could an unsent letter change anything? Or would it only leave me more confused before tomorrow, when I'd walk into my father's company as the one with the power to approve or reject their critical project? I pulled the uniform bag closer, unzipping it. The navy blue fabric hung neatly, metals aligned perfectly, the eagle insignia gleaming on the collar. Tomorrow, everything would change. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had a job to do. And maybe, just maybe, they'd see who I really was. I closed the closet, tucking the uniform behind old winter sweaters. The doorbell rang. Eric had arrived. I stood checking myself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the hesitant girl from years ago. She was Colonel Rebecca Adams. But tonight I still had to be James and Linda Adams's daughter. Just for one more night. Some houses never change, not because time forgets them, but because the people inside refuse to move forward. The next morning I woke to a soft knock and the familiar smell of coffee seeping through the door. My mother still brewed coffee early just like always, except no one made a cup for me. I dressed in jeans and a sweater, leaving the uniform in the closet, and went downstairs. Breakfast was ready. Fried eggs, toast, sausage. The same meal from my high school days. The kitchen glowed with golden light, but I still felt cold. "Did you sleep well?" my mother asked, not looking at me, her hands busy folding napkins. "Fine," I replied. "Eric told me about his presentation to Miranda last night. He did so well. She's sharp picks people carefully. He really makes me proud." I nodded, cutting into my eggs without a word. She hadn't asked about my job, my life, or why I was here. Not a single question. Not a glance of curiosity. Have you ever sat at a table listening to your parents praise someone else's success, like you're just a passerby? If you have, leave a comment. I bet more people understand that feeling than we think. Your father's going to the office early. They're meeting with some military folks today. Apparently someone from the Pentagon's joining. My mother sipped her coffee calm, as if she didn't know I was that person. "Is that so?" I said, staring out the window. The sky was clear, but my heart felt heavy. She stood to clear the table, then paused. "Oh, I found some of your old high school certificates yesterday. You were so talented. If only you'd gone into finance or law. You'd probably be a vice president somewhere by now." I didn't respond. At this point, words would only spark conflict. And I knew my mother, she avoided conflict, but excelled at saying things that silenced others. I stood washing dishes like I used to. The kitchen still had the same cream-colored tiles, the same small crack near the faucet from when I broke a glass as a kid and got scolded. Everything was frozen like a museum of memories no one bothered to dust or rearrange. After breakfast, I stepped into the backyard. The lavender bushes were still there, wilted from the frost. I remembered the day I left with my suitcase, when my father only said, "I hope you don't regret this." Not good luck, not I love you, just a vague wish, half-hearted. I walked the narrow path to the fence where the wooden swing still stood. The autumn wind whistled through the trees. I sat, hands in my pockets. Inside was the mechanical watch General Ross gave me, engraved with "earned, not given." A voice called out, "Rebecca, Eric's here." I stood, walking back inside. The door closed behind me, and I was ready for tonight's dinner, a family reunion, or a stage where old judgments would play on repeat like a broken record. Some scars aren't on the skin, but on the walls and in memory. I closed the bedroom door, sitting on the bed, looking around my old room. The walls were still pale blue, the curtains still, the sheer ones my mother bought from the local supermarket. On the dresser, a few porcelain figurines' birthday gifts from my high school years sat untouched in their old spots. I walked to the bookshelf. The novels I'd devoured, Orwell, Steinbeck, some Fitzgerald. Everything sealed in memory. I noticed a long scratch near the desk from the night I angrily dragged my pen across it after announcing I'd won the ROTC scholarship. It was the first time I truly stood up to my father. "The military, Rebecca, do you realize you're throwing away your future?" His voice wasn't angry, but desperate. I stood firm, resolute, in a way that surprised even me. "This is my path, and I'll follow it to the end." He said nothing more, just left the room. The scratch was still there. My mother hadn't painted over it, hadn't covered it. As if it too was part of the legacy. Have you ever had a moment where a single look or word made you realize you weren't the person your family wanted? Share it if you'd like, sometimes writing it out eases the weight. I sat on the floor, leaning against the bed. The cold wood seeped into my back. I closed my eyes, letting memories rush in like wind through the eaves, the letter of acceptance from the military academy. The first time I stood in front of a mirror in my uniform, the day I drove away from this house under my mother's heavy gaze. And then I thought of the unsent letter. My mother's familiar, trembling handwriting. An apology, left incomplete. Love hidden behind layers of expectations and fear. I picked up the letter again, and for the first time in years, tears fell in this house. Not sobs, just silent, like a quiet night rain no one notices. I knew my mother loved me. But she was also a victim of a generation that believed a good daughter was an obedient one, stable, married early with a suitable job. And I dared to veer from that straight path. This room was where I'd written dreamy diaries, argued with Eric over the TV remote, and dreamed of doing something big. Now I had, but these walls never knew. I stood slipping the letter back into its envelope, placing it on the desk where it should have belonged long ago. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling where the glow in the dark stars I'd stuck up in 8th grade still faintly shone. Tomorrow I'd step into their world, not as the daughter who disappointed them, but as a colonel representing the United States government. Some meals aren't meant to nourish the body, but to reaffirm your place in a family that thought it knew its hierarchy. I stood before the mirror, tying my hair into a low bun. No uniform, no colonel's insignia, just the square-necked blue dress my mother sent me 3 years ago with a brief note. This dress suits you better than those soldier outfits. Dinner was ready. The smell of grilled meat, melted butter, and garlic bread filled the house. My mother had set the table meticulously white tablecloth, the porcelain dishware reserved for special occasions. Part of me knew it was for my return, but another part, more obvious, was for Eric's presence. My brother arrived on time with his wife Megan in a pale gray dress, her hair neatly curled. They hugged my mother, shook hands with my father, and greeted me like an old colleague they hadn't seen in years. I smiled politely. We sat passing dishes around. My father served meat to my mother. Eric talked about the office. Megan praised a new wine they'd tried. And I quietly ate my pumpkin cream soup, feeling like an actor miscast in my own family's play. Rebecca, do you remember your cousin Tiffany? My mother said, pouring wine. She was promoted to deputy investment director in New York last week. Only 30. Yeah, that's amazing. Tiffany's always been great. I said no effort needed. I liked Tiffany. She never acted superior even when the family held her up as a benchmark. Great and knows how to choose her path. My mother continued, not looking at me. She doesn't run around like some people. A stable apartment, a stable job, a clear future. That's real success. Her words landed like a thin blade across the table. I didn't respond. Megan gave an awkward smile. My father kept eating potatoes. Speaking of which, Eric cut in, oblivious to the tension I'm presenting the plan for the project Miranda Cole personally assigned me next week. She said she needed someone with vision and decisiveness, and clearly I made the cut. I met his eyes. I knew exactly which project he meant, the one I'd approved the preliminary plan for 3 weeks ago as the Pentagon's representative, but I only smiled. Congrats, Eric. Miranda's picky. Being chosen is something to be proud of. Exactly, he nodded, pride evident. She needs someone who understands both the technical and personnel sides. The military's sending a representative to next week's meeting, but it's probably just a formality. You know how the military is, everything's by protocol. No one dares to get creative. The table chuckled lightly, except me. My father set his wine glass down, nodding. I've always told your mother the military's good for discipline, but not for those aiming high. Everything's capped by rank, not real ability. My mother silently picked at her salad. Megan glanced at me slightly uneasy. I kept smiling. So Rebecca's still at the same rank, lieutenant or captain? Maybe Eric asked, half curious, half teasing. Actually, I'm still in the technical division, I said briefly. But things have been busier lately. The new project's complex. I think you should find something more stable, my mother interjected. Move closer to home, or at least to the mainland. Always traveling like that. How will you ever find a husband, start a family? Have you ever sat in a room where everyone talks about you like you're not there? If so, leave a comment. How did your dinner go? I set my fork and knife down, folding my napkin. Mom, I think stability is a flexible concept. For some, it's staying in one place for 10 years. For others, it's knowing exactly what they're doing and why. My father gave a wry laugh. As long as you're happy with your choices. But don't expect people to understand or validate you if you pick an unconventional path. That could have sparked an argument. But I just nodded, sipped my water, and said softly, I don't need people to understand. Just to trust I'm doing what's right. The mood shifted. The conversation turned to travel. Eric was going to Hawaii. Megan got promoted to department head. My mother asked about Tiffany. No one asked about my life, my work, or what I'd been through these past 6 years. I ate, slowly listened, and smiled. Not sarcastically. Just a light smile from someone who'd learned not to argue to feel right. After dinner, I helped my mother wash dishes. She didn't say much. Once she glanced at me and asked quietly, Do you still have the watch your father gave you? I nodded. But in my mind, I thought of the other watch, the one General Ross gave me, engraved, earned, not given. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. This dinner didn't hurt like it used to. It only made me more certain tomorrow the truth would come out. They thought I was here just for a meal. They didn't know I'd be the one deciding the fate of their company's project in the coming weeks. I woke early. The sky was still dim. The house was quiet save for the soft creak of old floorboards under my steps. I brewed myself a coffee standing by the window overlooking the backyard lawn, where I'd spent hours as a kid dreaming of the future, not yet knowing those dreams would make me a rebel in my own family. On the table was my uniform prepared last night. I opened the garment bag, carefully hanging the jacket, smoothing every crease with a soft cloth. Each medal, each ribbon was polished, perfectly aligned. And finally, the silver eagle insignia, the symbol of a colonel in the U.S. Army. I'd once thought I'd wear this uniform in front of my family for the first time at some grand occasion, to see pride in my father's eyes. That never happened. Instead, I wore it for Pentagon meetings, ceremonies with generals, senators, and defense officials. People who saw me not as the daughter who rejected the easy path, but as a true cybersecurity expert. I put on a white dress shirt, tied the tie neatly buttoned each button. Then I slipped into the deep navy jacket, adjusting the collar, checking every detail. The uniform wasn't just clothing. It was history responsibility, honor things I'd poured my youth into preserving. Have you ever done something monumental that no one in your family knew about, or cared to know? If so, you're not alone. Share your story. Maybe it'll inspire someone else. When I pinned on the final badge, the clock read 06:30. I pulled the file folder from my bag, all the documents for Project Sentinel, the $1.2 billion defense contract between the Department of Defense and Vanguard Technologies, where my father was branch director and Eric had just been named implementation lead. I didn't know how they'd react when they learned I was the one approving budgets, technology, and security protocols. But I wasn't here to show off. I was here because it was my job, and because this country needed that project to succeed. I remembered the first time my name came up for the military liaison role in the project. General Evelyn Ross called me into her office, a simple, orderly room at Cyber Command headquarters. "Rebecca," she said, her voice steady and sparing as always. "We need someone who understands both tactics and technology. Someone who can talk to engineers and politicians. I'm choosing you." I was silent, stunned. "You're not the safest choice," she continued, "but you're the only one I trust to uphold military principles while understanding how a corporation thinks. And you've never let me down." I remembered nodding, hiding my emotion. Ross wasn't one to give trust lightly. Over the years, she was the only one who saw me as a true officer, not a girl trying to act tough. Under her guidance, I went from dry technical reports to high-level meetings, discussions with government experts and strategic consultants. I learned to stand firm in rooms full of people who doubted me, letting my skills, not my words, prove my worth. Project Sentinel was my first chance to apply everything I'd learned. It wasn't just a massive contract. It was an AI-integrated cyber defense system, using machine learning to detect and respond to cyber attacks in real time. A single mistake could have catastrophic consequences, potentially losing control of critical national infrastructure. I was the one with the authority to approve or reject every component from code to hardware to personnel. I looked at myself in the mirror, a 29-year-old woman with calm eyes, standing tall in her uniform, and thought, whatever happens today, I'm ready. I grabbed my keys, the file folder, and stepped out into the autumn dawn. The early sunlight glinted off the eagle insignia on my collar. My parents and Eric were still asleep. They didn't know their daughter, their sister, the one they thought had gone astray last night, was about to decide the success or failure of their company in the coming weeks. I wouldn't announce it to their faces. I'd let the truth speak for itself at the right time in the right place. Sometimes the truth doesn't need words, just a uniform, a well-timed handshake, and a title strong enough to make every eye look twice. I parked in the spot marked Military Liaison outside Vanguard Technologies' main entrance. The glass doors slid open as I approached, and the lobby's atmosphere seemed to pause. The first to see me was the receptionist, a young woman about 25, with neatly tied hair holding a coffee cup. Her hand froze mid-air when her eyes landed on the silver eagle on my shoulder. Others around her began looking up from their screens, watching quietly. I was used to those looks, part curiosity, part caution, and finally respect. "Good morning, Colonel," the receptionist said, slightly flustered but polite. "Do you need me to notify anyone?" "I have an appointment," I replied calmly. "I'll head to the executive floor. I've been granted access." She nodded quickly. "Of course, ma'am." The elevator opened. As the doors closed, I saw my reflection, upright posture, sharp uniform, steady gaze. But my heart wasn't entirely cold. I knew who was upstairs, and I knew what was coming. Have you ever walked into a room where people once looked down on you, but now you're the most powerful person there? If so, share how that felt. I bet many have been through it and triumphed by their own true worth. The elevator stopped at the 14th floor, the executive level. The doors opened, and I nearly stepped into a conversation. As long as she sticks to the timeline, I'll present the interface design next week. That voice, I recognized it instantly, Eric's. He stood near the waiting area, eyes on a tablet, not looking up. But the man next to him, my father, stopped mid-sentence. His eyes met mine, and I saw 3 stages of realization cross his face: surprise, confusion, and finally, uncertainty. "Rebecca," he asked, as if not trusting his eyes. "What's going on? Why are you dressed?" "Dad," I nodded. "Hello, sir," I added, addressing the man with them, likely a department director. Eric turned, his brow furrowed deeper when he saw the Silver Eagle insignia. "What the hell?" I offered only a polite smile. "I'm here for the meeting. On time." "She's a colonel," the man with my father whispered, as if he couldn't believe it. Before I could respond, a familiar voice came from the left hallway: Colonel Adams. "Glad you could make it in person. I thought we'd only meet via video today." I turned. CEO Miranda Cole approached, platinum hair, cropped short gray blazer, sharp eyes like a blade, but not without warmth. She was one of the most powerful women in the defense industry, and today she was smiling at me. "Hello, Miranda," I said, shaking her hand, my gaze steady. "I thought it'd be better to assess things in person." "I completely agree. Your presence will make this meeting far more effective." Miranda turned to the group. "James, Eric, perhaps you should be reintroduced. This is Colonel Rebecca Adams, the primary military representative for Project Sentinel. She has full authority over all approvals from the Department of Defense." The air in the hallway thickened. My father took a slight step back. Eric was speechless. "Colonel," my father murmured, as if confirming it to himself. "Let's head to the meeting room," I suggested, my voice still calm. "We have a lot to review." Miranda led the way. I followed. Behind me, I heard whispers ripple like small waves, not from my family but from employees who'd witnessed the moment. I knew what they were thinking. The woman they'd once seen as the rebellious daughter who left for a strange choice was standing here not as family, but as a commander. And I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth and this uniform spoke enough. I'd always thought silence was my strongest weapon. But that morning, in the 15th floor meeting room of Vanguard Technologies headquarters, amid the stark light of truth and stunned gazes, I realized nothing shakes people more than a well-timed presence. And I was there, not shrinking, not stepping back. In the chair I'd been invited to sit in as a colonel in the Department of Defense's representative. Have you ever faced someone who once dismissed you, yet stayed calm and impartial? If so, share your story in the comments. I bet you know how I felt that morning. Vanguard's main meeting room was sleek glass walls, light-colored furniture chairs aligned with precision. Beside me was CEO Miranda Cole, her posture rigid, her gaze sharp enough to stop a room with silence. Eric entered a few minutes later, carrying a thick stack of documents and unmistakable unease. His eyes met mine, then darted away. My father, James Adams, followed, maintaining his usual dignified air. But I saw what I'd longed for years ago, a flicker of disorientation. The meeting began at 9 a.m. sharp. Miranda nodded to me. "Colonel Adams will co-chair the first part of today's meeting regarding the Aegis contract and technical milestones requiring military confirmation." I nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Cole. We'll start with the presentation from the Integrated Interface Development Team, led by Mr. Eric Adams." The room stirred slightly. Eyes flicked between us. No one spoke, but everyone knew Eric was my brother, I was his sister. If anything, our family ties only heightened the tension, not eased it. Eric began his presentation. His voice trembled slightly. Slides flashed up system diagrams, integration metrics. He was making the same mistake I did early in my career, presenting to impress, not to be scrutinized. "We believe the current interface is intuitive enough to meet the tactical operational requirements set by the military." I set my pen down. "Mr. Adams, may I ask, what's the response latency in a simulated multi-layer distributed attack scenario?" Eric froze, glancing at his notes. "I think under 80 milliseconds. Specifically, because the military standard is 42 milliseconds. Your project's at 78.6 per yesterday's technical report from the partner team." Silence. The room's attention sharpened. Miranda pursed her lips, saying nothing, but I felt her scrutiny. So I suggest the integration team add a local offload module, establish a response priority framework, and retest within 72 hours. The approval deadline can't be delayed. Eric nodded, but his eyes showed a collapse, not because I challenged him, but because he didn't know I knew. Didn't know I held a position he'd never imagined. I turned to my father. Mr. Adams, as branch director, I need confirmation of current resource capacity to meet the technical deadlines required by the Department of Defense. Can I receive the latest resource allocation report? He looked at me. For a moment, I wasn't the daughter he'd called settling for a government paycheck. I was the one requesting executive-level data. His voice was hoarse. Yes, Colonel. I'll send the updated report today. I didn't gloat. There was no victory here. Only duty. Everyone in this room was working toward a shared goal, and I couldn't let personal feelings cloud my role. Looking out, the Colorado sky was clear and blue. I wondered how many people have sat in a room like this underestimated because of their background gender age, or for not following the path others laid out. If you've been through something similar, I invite you to leave a comment. Not to complain, but to prove together true worth doesn't need misplaced applause. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. I answered every technical question, reviewed report modules, and approved next phases with clear conditions. Miranda stayed silent, but at the end she gave a slight nod as if confirming something significant. As I gathered my documents, Eric approached quietly. Rebecca. He lowered his voice. You're really the one approving this entire project. I met his eyes. Not approving, overseeing, evaluating, and taking responsibility for national security at the Department of Defense level. He nodded. I saw not just shock in his eyes, but something close to respect. My father approached. Miranda was still there, speaking with the vice president. Rebecca, Colonel Adams, can we talk privately for a moment? I nodded. But before we left, Miranda turned, shaking my hand in front of him. You proved today why the Department of Defense trusts you. I believe this project is in safe hands. I caught my father's gaze, and for the first time I didn't see the familiar disappointment in his eyes. We stepped into the hallway. He spoke softly. I can't believe. You're the one evaluating my and Eric's work. I didn't answer right away. Some truths don't need words. Standing firm before someone who once doubted you, that's an answer in itself. After a light lunch with the defense team, I returned to the temporary office assigned to me at Vanguard. Reports awaited, but in my heart another storm was brewing, not from work, but from an invitation from Miranda for tonight. Rebecca, could you join an internal dinner with me and some senior leaders, and I've invited your family. I think it's time everyone sits down together, don't you? It took me a moment to react. A dinner with the CEO, with those who once saw me as the failed daughter. If you were me, would you go? Would you sit at a table with people who doubted you could achieve anything and show them the truth? If you would leave a comment, I'd go but as myself. I made my decision. And stepping into that evening, I knew everything I'd fought through was to prepare me for this moment. I'd never witnessed a father apologize to his daughter in front of a 4-star general and a CEO. But that night, the impossible happened, in a way none of us foresaw. The restaurant was classic French, with soft lighting, the gentle clink of cutlery on porcelain, and faint Chopin melodies drifting from a corner. Everything was perfectly arranged, but inside I was bracing for a mental battlefield. I walked in with General Ross, the steadfast backbone of my military career, and CEO Miranda Cole, an emblem of power that didn't need to flex. My parents were already there, seated next to Eric. Unlike the tense morning, the atmosphere now was silent, my heartbeat almost audible in my chest. Miranda greeted everyone with polished authority. I've been looking forward to this dinner. We've talked enough about systems and tech tonight. I want to know the people behind them. I looked at my father. He gave a slight nod, but his eyes held a distance I couldn't name. Maybe embarrassment, or pride not yet fully cracked. Appetizers were served. Someone mentioned the weather, another asked about the food. My mother sat quietly, her eyes occasionally flicking to me, as if wanting to say something, but hesitating. Eric stayed silent. Ross broke the quiet first. Turning to me, she addressed the table I met Rebecca during an internal training at West Point. That was the year she refused an order she deemed unethical, despite earning a reprimand. I knew then, if we were lucky, she'd become a commander, not easily swayed. Miranda laughed. Like this morning, I've never been challenged so sharply on technicals in a presentation. But that's what I respect more than compliance. No one spoke. I glanced at my father. He stared at his red wine, as if it held an answer he wasn't ready to face. Well, my father said softly, then stood. All eyes turned to him. He cleared his throat, hands still on his chair. May I say a few words if it's not a bother? No one stopped him. But inside, my senses braced. I didn't know what I'd hear an excuse or something I'd never imagined. He looked up, his voice not loud but clear. I'm James Adams. I've run a defense industry branch for nearly 20 years. I believed in systems numbers results. And because of that belief, I thought my daughter betrayed our values when she chose the military over an administrative role like others in our family. He paused, looked at me, for the first time without an invisible wall. I underestimated her, not because I didn't love her, but because I didn't understand. I thought being an officer was giving up, avoiding real competition. I said those things, and now I take them all back. My mother gripped her napkin tightly. Eric looked down, his expression unreadable. Rebecca isn't just a colonel. She commands hundreds, oversees billions in budgets, and keeps safe the systems my own company develops. And I'm proud. My only regret is that it took me so many years to see it. He stopped, took a breath, then turned to Ross and Miranda. I want to apologize to both of you for ever dismissing the value of those who serve in the military, and to my daughter for not having the courage to say this sooner. I don't remember exactly what I did then, only that I stood. We hugged. No words, but in that embrace was a decade filled. Ross nodded slightly. Miranda smiled, a rare smile free of politics. After the apology, the dinner lightened. People asked questions, shared stories about West Point. My first overnight shifts, the contract signing, nearly missed because I was in Syria. My mother shared childhood memories, the time I cut my hair to pass as a boy to play baseball with the neighborhood kids. Eric chimed in for the first time all day. You once said the military was the only choice that made you feel worth something. I think I'm starting to get why. I looked at him, saying nothing, just a slight smile. The dinner ended with a raised glass, my father's idea. To the lessons we take years to learn, and to those brave enough to teach us through their lives. As I left the restaurant, I walked slower than usual. The air wasn't a facade anymore. It was real. My father had acknowledged me. Things wouldn't go back to how they were, and I didn't want them to. I only wanted them to move forward. But there was still one thing I didn't know. Something my mother had held on to longer than my father's apology. A letter, and I would find it soon enough. Some apologies are spoken in trembling voices at a formal dinner, but others, deeper, quieter, are tucked into old handwriting, smudged ink, and a yellowed envelope forgotten in a drawer. That's how my mother chose to speak, and that's what I was about to find. After dinner, instead of parting ways as usual, we returned to the old Colorado house together. My mother offered to make tea. For the first time in years, I didn't decline. My father and Eric followed, each lost in their own thoughts I couldn't yet decipher. The living room was as quiet as when I'd first arrived. But now the silence wasn't cold distance. It was the cautiousness of people learning to be close again. I sat on the sofa, my hands still warm from the wine. My mother came from the kitchen carrying a silver tray with a white porcelain teapot she only used for special occasions. She sat across from me, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes met mine with steady resolve. I have something for you, she said, placing an envelope on the table. I recognized it instantly. The paper was slightly yellowed, the edges curled. I'd never seen it before, but I knew by the instinct of a soldier who'd read thousands of classified reports that this was an unshared piece of memory. I wrote this after seeing the first article about you in a military magazine, but I didn't send it. I don't know why. Maybe fear, maybe shame. I opened the letter slowly. Her familiar, slanted handwriting, the kind she used for recipe notebooks, unfolded before me. Dear Rebecca, I read about you, about your mission, about how you lead, how you keep other soldiers safe. I'm both proud and guilty. For years, I didn't understand why you chose that path. I wasn't brave enough to stand by you against the family's silence. Do you know, some nights I dream of you as a little girl running out the door with a backpack bigger than you, eyes teary. I wake up and can't sleep again. I wanted to call you, but I didn't know where to start. I'm sorry for not sending this sooner. If you ever read this, please believe my love for you never faded. I just didn't know how to show it at the right time. Your mother, Linda Adams. I folded the letter, my hands trembling slightly. No tears. But something in me softened, like removing armor after a long day, letting the breeze touch your skin for the first time. I thought you never wondered why I left, I said softly. My mother looked at me. I wondered every day. But I was raised to stay silent for peace. Over time, silence became habit, then distance. I nodded. I'm at fault too. I thought I didn't need family. Turns out I learned to live without, but I never forgot how it felt to want to be understood. Eric spoke up, sitting closer. Rebecca, I don't know where to start. When we were kids, you always did things differently. You didn't go to the school Dad wanted, didn't take the career he planned, didn't love the way Mom approved. I gave a small laugh. And you thought that made me wrong. He shook his head. I used to. But today, seeing you at the head of that meeting leading a team I thought was the top, you weren't on the wrong path. You were just ahead of everyone else. His words were like a latch unfastening. My shoulders felt lighter. Recognition not through applause but through understanding was the greatest reward for years of walking alone. We sat for nearly another hour. We didn't need to resolve everything in one night, but we'd started again with honest words for the first time. Before heading upstairs, I paused at the door looking back at my parents, and Eric, 3 figures close together bathed in the golden glow of the lamp like late-day sunlight. Tomorrow, I said, I'm heading back to Washington. But I'll come back not to prove anything anymore, just because I want to. My mother nodded, her eyes glistening but tearless. My father squeezed my shoulder. Eric gave me a smile no longer competitive, just familial. I opened my apartment door just as the elevator dinged. 3 figures stepped out, my mother carrying a cloth-wrapped pie box, my father carefully holding a long wooden frame, and Eric with a bag of wine bottles like he was attending a birthday party. Rebecca, my mother, called my name with a lightness, as if 10 years of distance had never existed. I took the pie, feeling the warmth of the crust and the faint scent of cinnamon. That smell was once the hallmark of every childhood Christmas. I smiled instinctively. Nice apartment, my father said, scanning the space. Tidy sharp, like its owner. I wasn't sure if it was a compliment, but this time I didn't need to confirm. Dinner was simple: pumpkin soup, grilled salmon mixed greens, and my mother's pie for dessert. We sat around a 4-person table under warm lights, with the curtains swaying in the late spring breeze. No debates about career choices. No mentions of the meeting or speeches. Instead, my mother asked if the helicopters near the Pentagon bothered me. My father asked about designing security for national data centers. Eric talked about his AI project, for the first time genuinely seeking my feedback. And I answered each question unguarded, unhesitating. Dad brought this for you, he said, placing the wooden frame on the table. I opened it. It was an article from Defense Weekly, the one about me as the strategic commander behind one of the nation's largest cyber defense systems. Below, my father had written, "To my daughter, the one I once misunderstood." I touched the glass. This time no tears. But I knew I'd hang it not to boast, but to remind me that some old cracks can become stronger bridges than they ever were. Do you remember, my mother said, while slicing the pie when you were little, you begged me for a pocket knife? I laughed. Because I wanted to go camping. But you wouldn't let me. Not because I didn't trust you, she whispered, but because I was scared you'd grow up and leave. And in the end you did. It took me until recently to understand loving you doesn't mean keeping you here, but giving you the strength to go. I set my fork down looking at her. I carried your love with me all these years, even when I didn't know what it looked like. Eric raised his glass. To the kids who know where they need to go, even when no one supports them. And to the parents brave enough to welcome them back. We clinked glasses. No fanfare, no slogans. But I knew this was a new beginning, not a restart, but a continuation from where we stopped understanding each other. The dinner ended with warm apple pie and melting vanilla ice cream. I never thought I'd see those familiar faces in my small DC kitchen under the ceiling light I'd hastily installed when I moved in. Are you really okay? My mother asked, not out of doubt, but as if learning to ask an adult. I'm fine, I said, and I'm glad you're all here tonight. As I saw them out, my father patted my shoulder, no longer awkward. My mother reminded me to sleep early. Eric lingered, whispering, You've changed every definition of success I ever had. Thanks, sis. I didn't reply, just nodded. Sometimes you don't need many words to be understood. When the door closed, I stood in the hallway, silent, relieved, as if the final piece of my journey back to myself had been completed by the soft laughter of that dinner. I walked back to the table, picking up the article my father brought. On the back, he'd added in pencil, We can't go back to start a new beginning, but we can always start again to create a different ending. If there was a moment that made you see a loved one in a completely new light, it's when someone else tells their story, not through medals, but through memories. Today, I saw that happen right in my living room. General Evelyn Ross arrived Saturday afternoon in casual clothes, but with an unmistakable commanding presence. She was the first to see me not as a rookie, but as a seed that could grow into something great. Today I brought her to meet my dearest family, so they could know who I was, what I'd been through, and why I became who I am now. "You really got her to come?" Eric asked when I told him. "General Ross in the flesh," I nodded, "and she loves apple pie." My mother laughed, rolling up her sleeves to make a fresh batch as if preparing for a guest from another world. Ross arrived on time. As she stepped through the door, she gave me a tight hug, the kind only someone who's faced fear with you can give. "Rebecca Adams," she said, turning to my father. "Mr. Adams, I've heard a lot about you. It's great to meet the family of the woman I see as my own daughter." I saw my father's eyes shift. My mother's, too. The way Ross spoke, no flattery, no pretense carried the weight only someone who's made life or death decisions could wield. We sat in the living room with apple pie and hot tea served like a simple but thoughtful ritual. Ross glanced at my wall where a single photo of me in uniform hung among soldiers in the Middle East. "This was after the Kandahar mission," she said. "She stopped a cyber attack on the Coalition's communication system. 3 minutes slower and we'd have lost a squad." I lowered my head, not out of modesty, but because I still remembered the icy chill of sitting at a keyboard in the desert, hands gritty with sand, every line of code a life. "What was Rebecca like back then?" my mother asked, her eyes both hesitant and eager. Ross smiled. "Stubborn, defiant, asked too many questions, but never to shirk responsibility, only to get things right. Once I made her clean a storage shed for arguing with a commander. Instead of complaining, she redesigned the entire inventory system, saved us 30% of our retrieval time." Eric chuckled. "Sounds like her as a kid. She once took apart the printer just to prove the manual was wrong." Ross continued. "I asked her once why she stuck with the military despite her family's disapproval. She said, because I needed to learn how to protect something, so when I came back I'd be strong enough to hold on to my family. I'd never shared that with anyone else." Hearing it from Ross in front of my parents and brother choked me up. Not from shame, but because a part of me was finally understood through someone else's words. My father nodded, eyes fixed on his tea. "I thought Rebecca left to escape. Turns out she left to learn how to come back." Ross looked at him. "You're not the only one who thought that. But I'll be honest, if I had to pick one person to trust with my team's safety in a crisis, it's Rebecca. Not because she's a woman, not because she's young, but because she listens even when no one's on her side." My mother placed her hand on my shoulder. For the first time, she didn't hide her emotion. "Thank you," she said to Ross. I let her go without understanding I was missing the greatest chance to walk alongside her. Thank goodness it's not too late. The conversation stretched until the tea grew cold. Ross left, leaving behind a quiet room, not the silence of estrangement, but of people who'd just heard a story they never thought they'd hear from an outsider. As I walked her out, Ross paused, looking at me. "You've come far," she said. "But what matters is you came back without carrying anger." I nodded. "I didn't come back for justice, just to tell the truth through people who could vouch for it." Ross smiled, then walked away, her posture as straight as the day we met. That evening I sat alone, looking out at DC's lights. I thought of the times I'd braced myself for validation, then realized true recognition comes not from affirmation, but from being witnessed when someone hears your story from someone who was there. Some battles end not with a bang, but with a quiet clink of glasses and eyes that no longer clash. That night, my father raised a glass of red wine in my small DC kitchen, a place he never thought he'd enter as a father learning to love his daughter again. "To you," he said, looking straight at me. "We took years to circle back. But today, I think we've arrived at the right place. And I understand now." No speech, no regrets. Just those 4 words, "I understand now," enough to make me want to cry. But instead of letting tears fall, I gripped my wine glass, holding the moment like it might slip away. I replied, slowly but firmly, I never needed apologies to live true to myself. "But I'm grateful you chose to understand me, not judge me." From where I sat, I could see the balcony where city lights reflected on the window. Those glimmers were like fractured memories pieced together, vibrant, but not blinding. Eric clinked his glass with mine. "You won, sis." I shook my head. I never wanted to win. I just wanted to be myself and still keep the people I love. My mother set the pie plate on the table. "You've kept us, and so have I." We ate dinner again, but this time without tension or awkward silences. We shared old stories like the time I hid my military scholarship letter under my pillow, scared my father would find it. He sighed. If I'd asked more, then things might have been different. But if they were, I said, we might not be here today. No one argued. Maybe because we all knew the long detour had led us back to the right place, back to each other. After the meal, they left one by one. Before crossing the threshold, my mother hugged me tightly. I don't need to say more, do I? I smiled. No, Mom. I heard it in the pie you made and the way you sat quietly to listen. My father took my hand no longer stiffly. I'm proud of you. But more than that, I'm grateful you didn't give up on us, even when we gave up on you emotionally. I didn't need to reply. I just tilted my head, letting my eyes speak for my heart. When I was alone, I stepped onto the balcony. The city lights blazed. I took a deep breath. The early summer air carried the scent of jasmine from a nearby park. The small sounds of life below played like a gentle soundtrack car, horns, a couple's laughter, the tap of shoes on the sidewalk. I once thought returning was a battle, but it was a journey. And victory didn't come from others changing for me, but from staying true to myself without losing those I love. There was no resentment left in me, no need to prove myself. Only gratitude for what I'd been through for those who paused to listen, and for myself, for having the patience not to choose revenge when misunderstood. If you're in that journey between being understood and misunderstood, between wanting to forgive and be understood, I hope you'll choose the kinder path. Not because others deserve it, but because you deserve to be at peace. And so, my journey from a daughter dismissed to a woman recognized has reached its end. But I believe this isn't just my story. It's the story of many out there who've walked in silence, carrying the pain of being misunderstood or rejected, yet chose grace over vengeance. I've learned that love doesn't always come in words, but if you're patient and brave enough, it finds its way back. True success isn't defeating others, but staying true to yourself and keeping those you love. If you've been through something similar or stand at the crossroads of forgiveness and silence, leave a comment. I'd love to read and hear your story. And if this journey touched you, please follow the channel so we can keep walking together through the next stories. Deeper, truer, and more real. See you in the next story.